So what exactly would it take to get us back to old school SEC media days? Who's going to lob a salvo? Who's going to say something mildly controversial from the city that decided a Major League Baseball All-Star game with their version of the two-point conversion in Atlanta? Pete Thamel will try to get to the bottom of this. This is the College Game Day Podcast. We are recording on July 16th. Pete is in the middle of covering SEC Media Days. I'm Rece Davis. We haven't been together for a while, and it's great to get things going with the two of us back together for College Game Day Podcast once again.
Rece, I hate to say it, but we are 2 days, 8 teams into SEC Media Days, and it has been vanilla, if we're going to say it nicely. Vanilla meaning, like, we don't have Johnny Manziel showing up the day after he drank himself out of the Manning Academy. We don't have anybody asking about Tim Tebow's sexual activity or lack thereof. We have coaches who are on guard, a little bit sick of talking. I feel like Destin was just a couple weeks ago. So everybody kind of said their piece, and the actual things they're talking about, meaning like NIL versus rev share and different things like that, I don't think they really resonate with the public. So there has been no significant trash talk of any kind. Lane Kiffin even said,
I was going to say, Lane Kiffin's already been there too, and nothing happened.
He's been here.
Yeah.
It's been the quietest Lane Kiffin ever. Now, Lane Kiffin is actually a quiet person when you meet him. He's like a pretty subdued personality, more introverted than he is on Twitter, right?
And on the Feinbaum show, did you see that 9-minute clip with Lane and Paul Feinbaum? Absolute comedic gold. Genius.
Yes. Neither of them is afraid to be awkward, and they really embraced that.
But Lane said he was thing anybody said about Paul. It's the nicest thing anyone's ever said.
Paul in the lobby. He got his workout in. I give him credit this morning. He had a towel around his neck. He was in the coffee shop getting a little breakfast. So Lane on the plane with his players was giving him the media day pep talk, right? Don't be afraid to be boring. Don't be afraid to say the same answers. Don't feel like you have to keep talking to fill the space when you get in trouble. Da 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 da. And then he stopped and he was just like, I don't do any of that. And then so he said, I'm going to try to be a little more muted this year at Media Day. So people were trying to set him up. He took some jabs at Hugh Freeze's golf game. I would say the spiciest thing that's emerged is a couple jabs at Hugh Freeze's golf game. And Auburn's corresponding, I know you have some Auburn fans in the house, Rece. Auburn's corresponding lack of recruiting. It's not really corresponding, but fans have conflated it as corresponding. So yes. there's been some subtle jabs, but considering the thousands of hours of media that have emerged from here, there's been very little spice, hatred, animosity. I don't know. I feel like all the coaches like each other. That's no fun. So anyway, it's been fine. It's been a good media day. There's been some things happening. I'm not complaining, but I do pine, Rece, for days of more animosity.
I haven't been to SEC media days in a number of years, but one of the first ones I went to back when they had them every year at the Winfrey Hotel in Birmingham, which was attached to the Galleria Mall. And, there were, actually this year that I'm going to say, there are only 10 teams in the league, right? So I was still working in Columbus, Georgia, and it was the year, it was in 1991 SEC Media Days, right after Steve Spurrier's first year at Florida. And the Gators were on probation, not because of anything that Steve had done. He had come in, and so technically Florida was ineligible to win the SEC championship. Yet, as they often did during Spurrier's tenure, they finished first in the SEC the first year he was there in 1990. So we have the SEC Media Days in 1991, and I'm just a lowly sports anchor from Columbus, Georgia. I don't know Steve Spurrier personally, never met him. He certainly didn't know me from Adam's house cat, as we say in the South. So we're back then, Pete, and I know you probably can't imagine this right now with all the private planes and people getting out of there as soon as they finish their turn at the mic. In fact, there was a plane waiting on Lane Kiffin when he decided to stop by Paul Feinbaum's set the other day. But back in those days, there wasn't all of that. And there was a media coach golf event in the afternoon.
Oh,
and one of the afternoons of the show. So I'm on the elevator standing there, we'd finished the workouts, and here comes Steve Spurrier. He steps in, and I think there are a couple other people on the elevator. Spurrier looks at me, no idea who I am, doesn't care. And he goes, know how many of those other coaches going to play golf with you media boys? And I said, no, I don't know. How many? He goes, I'm the only one. Just me. Yep. He said, guess all those other guys are back there trying to figure out some secrets of football and stuff. So I must be doing something wrong. All we did was win the league last year. Even they didn't give us a trophy. That's all we did. And he gets off the elevator. That was it. So they were back in the day, Pete. There was even trash talking to randos in the elevator. And that is
good. You prompted me down a great memory lane walk here, Rece. The SEC coaches during your media day debuts in the early 90s. Gene Stallings, Steve Spurrier, Ray Goff, Johnny Majors at Tennessee, Jackie Sherrill at Mississippi State, Billy Brewer at Ole Miss. NC Enforcement had a good time with this crew. Jerry DiNardo at Vanderbilt, Pat Dye at Auburn, Curly Hallman at LSU, and our friend Bill Curry at Kentucky.
Do you know
That's a good crew right there. That'll bring back some good early 90s SEC vibes.
After and by the way, Curly Hallman, really nice man, was a good coach. Brett Favre's coach at Southern Mississippi.
At Southern Miss, yeah. Sure.
So after Curly Hallman's tenure at LSU went sideways, which virtually every LSU coach's tenure went sideways prior to the arrival of Nick Saban. That's what I've always said about Nick. After the accomplishments at Alabama in terms of on-the-field accomplishments and championships and all of that, the second biggest thing he did in the history of this sport was he fixed LSU, which had been a coach's graveyard for the better part of half a century, including Curly Hallman, because Curly was a good coach. Do you know what Curly Hallman's next head coaching job was after it ended at LSU, his next head coaching job?
I don't know that.
Muscle Shoals High School, my alma mater, where I think he cut the grass himself. How about that? The LSU coach was back there, which now, by the way, maybe not so much.
Fire your agent, man. You didn't get the right buyout in 1990s.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit different. Now, these days, they even call it, now it certainly wasn't that way when I was in school there. It was a good place to go to school, but now they call it the University of Muscle Shoals. It's a powerhouse. They produce talent. They've got like an indoor facility and stuff.
Mark Sears, right?
And maybe Curly had a lot to do with that. But anyway,
they upgraded the talent, Rece, once you left.
Yeah, well, that's very true, particularly in my case. But that's not a very high bar to cross. But anyway, you don't have any of that so far. Yeah, you had a little. We had Diego Pavia in a tuxedo.
Diego Pavia was really, I had not met Diego Pavia, and he was everything I hoped for. You know what I mean? He was swashbuckling, trash talking. So I checked in with Clark Lee the night before, just to ask about the guys, whatever. And he said, my only media day scoop is we're telling Pavia to say no comment to every question.
It didn't take, really.
Yeah,
although he didn't say anything.
No, he you know what, like a lot of these guys, like he went right up and touched the line, but didn't go over it. As listeners of our podcast know, because I brought this up a few times, my favorite Diego Pavia story is that when he was at New Mexico State and they're playing in the New Mexico Bowl, he urinated on the New Mexico logo late at night, likely after having an adult beverage or two, and got caught. And then they tried to ban New Mexico State from playing in New Mexico's facility, and became a thing. And Pavia told a pretty funny story about how when they did let them practice, they surrounded the practice field with 30 cops. Jerry Kill yelled at all the cops.
Yeah. Did they keep Diego away from the Georgia State logos, which aren't far from where you guys are?
Not far. He did not. He is. I have no known reports of any more tinkling. He probably has a little too much at stake now with the NIL money and such. I believe his brothers, Rece, have a podcast where I just think is based on their general Nashville area debauchery and celebrating this Vanderbilt Renaissance. So I said some enterprising reporters should just go out drinking with them and have a good time. They could probably come up with a pretty good story.
I know the man for the job. You,
our guy Stanford Steve.
No, well, no, that's another man for the job. So I know several people for the job in that case.
We have quite a few on the game day crew. Just peek in the bar on Friday night after 10, and you would find all the assorted characters lined up who would be ready for that. But he's like Vanderbilt. I think it's fair to say is the least swaggiest program in the last century in college football, right? Like that, just the least juice, notable. They're in the bottom 5%, right? Like as it's gone, like they've had very few moments of positive identity. Now there was some, Bobby Johnson was okay. They had a blip here and there, but I feel like Pavi is just this perfect, ridiculous character to come in and help give them some energy. You know what I mean? He's been the face of it all. Clark Lee said, look, me, Jerry, and Diego aren't that much alike, but when you cut us open, we're all kind of the same competitor. Like in the guts, it's just all presented very differently. And I thought that was like a good, if you're going to transform a century of bad football, you need a pretty compelling character to like go up. So Pavi is, Vanderbilt at 7-6 and they threw parades for him and picked up the goalpost. He's like, look, we lost to Georgia State, we lost to Texas, and they had, Missouri. They had that Missouri game won. Remember that on the road? They missed a bunch of field goals. He's like, we were a lot closer to 10-2 than we were to 2-10. And I was like, all right, Diego, we can buy that little media day hype. So he was probably the most compelling character who came through, engaging, interesting, etc.
I'm looking at their season, refreshing my memory on the scores. The whole Big 12 thing is always how did you do in one score games, right? So they lost their first two, the two games you mentioned, Georgia State and Mizzou. Then they won their next two one score games against Alabama and Kentucky. Lost another one to Texas, so that makes them 2-3, and then lost one to LSU. So they're 2-4 in one score games. So it's not bad. You mentioned one of the things is we bounce around a little bit, and we're going to get to Arch Manning, which is the overarching, if you will, topic around college football and the SEC and the opening weekend with Texas going to Ohio State. Let's touch on, it's what we do on this podcast. There are a lot of people do different things with their pods. We try to touch a lot of different areas and mention teams, players that people might need to know a little bit later on. And the guy replacing Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, Austin Simmons. What did you get? You got a little time around him, did you?
Got some time around him, Rece, and spent a little time on the phone with his dad over the weekend and talked to Mike Bianco, the baseball coach at Ole Miss. Austin Simmons had played 2 seasons of SEC baseball before committing full-time to football this year. And he's a really compelling character. He is actually, his backstory and upbringing is actually much more interesting than Arch Manning's, in a sense of his path is completely unique to anyone that we've seen. So he graduated from high school 2 years early. And before now even starting a game for Ole Miss in his 3rd season, he's already a college graduate. His dad, Dave Simmons, there's some Marinovich overtones. Lane has mentioned this. And in terms of like fully programming the kid into sports to be a top prospect, driving him around, getting to the tutors, completely having the kid devote his life to that. So Mike Diago told me that in baseball, if Austin had fidelity to only baseball, he'd been high round draft pick. He's got a really electric, loose left arm. In fact, we all saw him go in against Georgia and have that 10-play, 75-yard drive for a touchdown to tie the game in Oxford earlier this year, which is this sort of shotgun coming out party. In April of 2024, in a baseball series against Georgia, he went in and struck out Charlie Condon. And I'm sure, Rece, with your love of college baseball, you know Charlie Condon, great Georgia player, number 3 overall pick in the MLB draft, one of the great players at Georgia ever, and helped them keep a lead, kind of got them out of a jam with a runner on in the 7th. And so there's some really interesting makeup and really interesting composure with Austin Simmons, and spent some time with him here, and he was very funny. How about this, Rece? This would be like one of those things you'll remember 20 years from now. There are 7 Simmons brothers, age 30 to age 6. The first 6 are left-handed, the oldest 6. The youngest one, the 6-year-old Nathan, has yet to declare which hand he is going to officially throw with. But there is a chance that they could have 7 southpaws amongst the 7 boys across the generation of Simmonses. Austin Simmons' arm is electric, and Lane and I had an interesting back and forth on this, where I said to him, basically, it's hard for me to articulate how the ball comes off his hand, but the ball comes off his hand special. And Lane, and sort of he was like, yeah, there's probably a lot of big words for it. I don't know it, but the first time I saw him throw, he said, that's Tua. Like, that's the Tua thing. It just like spins off in a beautiful way, and not just because he's left-handed. And he said, basically, like, he said, I don't know anything about golf, although he used a more colorful word. He said, but I'm sure there's golf coaches who just, when a guy hits the ball, just say, yes, that's it. And when you see Austin Simmons throw the ball, if you see the clips from that drive, or you just see some, him run it up on Furman on the last 2 drives or whatever, the ball just spins really, really pretty out of his hands. And Austin Simmons was, not shying away, not cliche. He was a really impressive young man. He was really fun to talk to. And he basically was just like, there's a lot more coming. There was a quiet confidence to him where he was not ducking like what was coming for him. He thinks he's built for it. He thinks he's ready for it. And I'm gonna look for this quote here, because it was I just want people to understand there's going to be a lot more moments like that. When I asked him about the drive, he said, I just know I'm made for it. And I kind of left as a believer. It's easy to believe in Lane with quarterbacks. Ole Miss has good skill always. The scheme's going to benefit him. They'll probably have a little bit better run game this year, which they didn't last year. So he may not throw for 8 billion yards. But, look, it's media day. You can kind of talk yourself into anybody. But I just kind of left the Austin Simmons interaction being like, that guy's going to be a dude. Like, there's some really dynamic things about him. And in quarterback circles, Rece, I'll just say this, in quarterback circles, again, it's off season, on air, there's really a thought that, boy, this guy has a high ceiling.
I'm looking, they were unsettled on the offensive line last year, though very experienced. They kind of middle of the road in terms of returning starters there. They have some freshmen and portal guys who had no big surprise there, who are going to be their primary skill targets, one would imagine. Their defense is largely rebuilt, with the exception of Centarian Perkins, who is one of my favorite players to watch. I don't know what I think of them right now, which I'm not sure. Ole Miss is one of those teams. I wonder about South Carolina, who I know Lenora Sellers was around media day. He's a really impressive guy, great quarterback. Not sure what I think about the rest of, when I say what I think, I know what I think. I think I'm not sold yet, because I'm worried about some of the holes at Ole Miss, at South Carolina, for sure, with those two. But if you're going to make a run in this transient world of college football now, if you plug the right pieces, the best place to start is to have dynamic quarterbacks. And Ole Miss is going to have that, it would seem. We know South Carolina is going to have that as well. So, this 2-year drought of championships, and the perception, right or wrong, that the SEC, while still tough, while still good, was a little half beat off, or a beat off last year from what it's been, may be true again, or you could be setting the stage for some really elite, dynamic play from a lot of rising stars in that league, particularly at the most important position.
in my relentless efforts to stir the pot, Rece, I asked Lane Kiffin. So a lot of coaches, especially because Heather Dinich was in the ESPN room, so she's asking me a lot about scheduling metrics and CFP stuff going forward. So there was a lot of conversations about the SEC and the perceived dominance, and should their losses be treated different? There are a couple interesting philosophical questions about that. So I just had to poke Lane a little bit, right? So I said, Lane, all right, you guys haven't even played for the title the last 2 years. How do you rectify that? Not winning with the internal perception, and Kirby certainly bangs this drum louder than anybody, that the SEC is so much better, everything's different. And Lane gave a very good answer, and I thought it was I thought it was measured, but he basically said, there are years where we haven't had the best team, and he's like, we haven't had it the last 2 years. It's obviously been Michigan and Ohio State, but where he stands on the table, and I would tend to agree, is the middle of the pack. Like in the upper pack. And look, that's what kept Ole Miss in the playoff last year, was they lost to Kentucky, a very pedestrian Kentucky team that really didn't do a whole lot else the whole rest of the season. And that's where he says that, that it needs to be acknowledged, if you will, statistically or metrically, I guess is the right word, right? That factor of the SEC it needs to be incorporated in. And he's basically saying it's deeper than everybody else. Would you agree with that?
Most years. I'm not sure that I agree with it last year, that it was particularly deeper than some of the others. That's the thing that I really believe that all of our colleagues and a lot of the fans, candidly, who are banging the drum of, you cannot do this playoff system unless the SEC plays the same number of conference games. Well, I think they should. I've gone on record here saying not only should they play 9, they should play 10. If you can be, and I don't mean with automatic bids, but if you are giving proper due to what those 10 games are. The conferences are so big now, particularly the SEC and the Big Ten, that even if you play the same number, that might not mean anything. I mean, we've been over this and over this and over this. Indiana's schedule was not like some of the others in conference, and forgetting about the games that they're not going to play non-conference. But within the conference last year, Indiana's schedule was not, not what some of the other Big Ten schedules were. So the pure number doesn't matter to me. But an objective way to measure your entire 12-game schedule and stack it up. And if within that, playing 8, hopefully 9, preferably, which will never happen, but for me, preferably 10, SEC and Big Ten games for that matter. Within that, then you see how strong it is with an objective measure. Most years, I believe that will favor the SEC. Most years. And the one thing that I will say that I don't think that anyone being reasonable or even mildly objective can argue with is that the cauldrons that you go into emotionally week in and week out, that the SEC wins every year. Not that every one of their places is better than every one of the Big Ten's places. But when you go into, as Alabama did, the game that cost it the trip to the playoffs last year, when you go into an Oklahoma with a losing record, that is a different feel than, I'm not going to insult any of the other. It's a different feel than going into, there's one I can still insult before hopefully they get good again. It's not like going into Purdue, and it's not like going to Northwestern. It's harder than that.
Purdue actually is a pretty good home environment. I would like but now they stink. Like,
yes, I know I know what people are going to say. So what about Ohio State? I'm not talking about good Purdue teams. I'm talking about when the fans are disappointed with the season, as Oklahoma fans were last year. When Purdue fans are disappointed with the season, when Northwestern fans are disappointed with the season, they're not as apt. I'm not saying they never do it, but they are not as apt to come out and make it wild. When Auburn is disappointed with the season, they're still showing up and making it a haunted mansion. That's just what they do. It's part of the culture, and it's great. They always win that. But to me, that can't carry the day every time. That can't carry the day and say, well, because of that, it's always tougher in the SEC. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Last year, I don't know that it was appreciably more difficult than the other Power Four conferences.
And play a game. Let's play What Will We Learn week 1.
Okay.
SEC schedule, because the empirical crossover evidence is limited, right? As you know, if the SEC goes to 9, it's going to be more limited. And that's one of the things that I fear for the future of the game is it becomes so siloed. We don't have, the same crossover. And Steve Sarkisian was very articulate about that yesterday. He wants Texas to play Ohio State, but doesn't want it to be punitive if they lose. And so anyway, we have said this many times on this podcast, Rece. We don't root for teams, we don't root for leagues, but we root for good games, right? Nobody wants the Charleston Southern game, right? That doesn't benefit anybody.
I'm okay with one of them.
Yeah, no, sure.
At any point in the season,
Yes.
I don't even care. The Big Ten people get all wound up if it happens in November. I'm okay with one of them as long as the rest of your games are representative.
Yeah. We want our crazy little funhouse world to continue to intertwine, just generally. And it would not be good for the sport if it just became an echo chamber, or more of an echo chamber of everybody. So we'll start with a quick Mississippi State at Southern Miss. Remember, Mississippi State got trucked by Toledo at home last year. They open in Hattiesburg. Charles Huff brings a vast majority of that Marshall team, including Braylon Braxton, who is the best player in the Sun Belt last year, most electric player in the Sun Belt last year, to Southern Miss to finish his career. What will we learn when one of the Sun Belt's most interesting teams plays Mississippi State?
We will learn that Southern Mississippi is on the upswing, and we'll be saying, will Mississippi State ever get this right? But at least they'll be 1-0.
Syracuse plays Tennessee, a clash of orange. Josh Heupel pled with his fans that the right shade of orange comes up when the ACC goes to Atlanta for I believe it's the AFLAC Week 1 challenge.
We will learn that the ACC is deeper than you think, and Tennessee's not as desperate and dire at quarterback as we thought.
Toledo, the Rockets. 2 mentions of Toledo in a minute on the podcast today.
I told you we were going to mention a lot of teams.
Yeah, they go to Kentucky. Is Kentucky on upset alert, Rece?
Yes. Kentucky is on upset alert when Toledo comes calling, big time.
2 years ago, Alabama at Florida State loomed as like just an unbelievable monster of a game. Now it's a very good game and it's very interesting. What will we learn there, Rece?
The ACC is deeper than we thought. That Florida State's season last year was a blip, an aberration, and we will also learn that Alabama is really, really good. Really, really good.
Alabama graduate Rece Davis is on the bus, ladies and gentlemen. He is on the bus.
If they get good quarterback play, and I don't just mean adequate. They don't need good quarterback play. If they get good quarterback play, presumably from Ty Simpson, or whether it's eventually Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, the freshman, if they get good high-level quarterback play, they might win the national championship. If they don't,
how about that?
I'm
a believer in the defense, by the way.
Yeah, if they don't, it's probably a season like last year, 3 or 4 losses.
Okay. That's very fair. And then we have the 2 Titanic clashes, because I've been around you so long, I know how to host. So I'm like saving the best for last. Let's start with LSU at Clemson. What do we learn?
We will learn that no matter how many times you put Clemson Tiger paws on practice hitting bags on tackling dummies, no matter how many times you put 1-0 in your building, you don't just waltz into Death Valley. Watch old Dabo run down the hill and stroll out with a victory. And the ACC will have bragging rights, and I will be able to use the stat once again that LSU has not started a season 1-0 since Joe Burrow was the quarterback.
Interesting.
That's not to say I'm giving up on LSU. LSU still might win the SEC, still might go to the playoff. but we'll find out the ACC gets bragging rights week 1 in Death
There.
Valley.
It was interesting to see how intentional Brian Kelly was about that. Now, he mentioned this on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he really doubled down on I've never done this in my career, but we're going all in, no pun intended, on week 1. They are changing the philosophy of their program to dial in on the opener even more. And I thought that was very interesting. It was very calculated, and it's going to be really interesting.
I'm generally not a fan of that, especially when you have such a long season in front of you. You can put emphasis on it, but you can cross the line. But given what's happened, not only when BK's been there, but the couple of years prior to that, I kind of like it. And I think it shows Brian Kelly, as we mentioned when Brian was on with us, both of us really like him. Your Massachusetts connection, I think, helps you. I'm very fond of Brian. I think he is an excellent football coach, and he also adapts. And he's like, okay, this is not some type of knee-jerk panic move, but he's like, okay, we haven't played to our standard coming out of camp in any of my time here. Lost a couple games to Florida State. One was close, one got away late, and then the USC game got away late. So he's like, okay, this is not working. So let's try something else. Let's try to energize the mindset, look at it differently. I'm all for that. And look, do I think Clemson's going to blow them out? No, of course not. I think that'll be a great football game. But as you know, I'm high on Clemson, and it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to say.
So is the NFL, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm picking them to win the national championship, because when you do preseason, you're like, okay, where do you anticipate these teams starting? And to start, I have Clemson preseason number 1, and I think in the game we're in Baton Rouge, I'd probably pick LSU. Games at Clemson, I'm gonna pick. As our friend Jonathan Wiley, our ace field producer, would say, I'm going to pick Dabo and M to win it.
That's a good Wiley.
Yeah.
Finally, Rece, we have Texas at Ohio State. What will we learn come high noon in Columbus on August 30th? Coach Corso will hoist the headset for the final time in what promises to be a glorious moment. What will we learn about the SEC and the Big Ten?
You'll learn that the SEC gets road bragging rights in this one. And I will also build up. We'll find out that Texas can answer the questions that people have about them, which the questions are, how are they going to be on the offensive line, and how are they going to be on the defensive line? And I think the answer will be just fine. Same for Ohio State, but I think you'll learn that. And I also think, to segue you into Arch, that I think he told you or said widely yesterday that he hadn't really done anything to deserve the attention he was getting. And one game will not merit the amount of attention that he will get as a result of this, but it will certainly be a giant step in that direction. I think you'll find out why the anticipation is high.
I think that's going to be a low-scoring game. So much new, 2 remade offensive lines, assuming Julian Sayin, although that's not a given, 2 inexperienced quarterbacks. Julian would be making his first start, I believe, and Arch would be making his 3rd start. I think that there will be a feeling out process. I think sometimes we anticipate these openers so much, Rece, and we sit around, we talk about them, we hype them up, and we forget that opening week in college football is usually kind of a bloody mess, right? Like, there's mistakes, there's pre-snaps, there's adjustments, especially in this portal era with so many new guys. So I think that game will be a very compelling slog. And I think both coaches, Sark calls the plays. Ryan has obviously had a hand in play calling for a long time, although didn't do it last year. I think both coaches are going to manage that game against their generally wide open instincts. I think they're going to punt in some field position and see if somebody's going to give it away. Before, I don't think anyone's going to go stake that thing and win it in the first half. I think there's going to be some dotting and some back and forth and some big defensive plays and see where the momentum strikes.
When I was in Austin a week or two ago, spending some time with Sark, I asked him for one player that we, maybe is not necessarily a household guy who will be soon. And the guy that jumped to mind was Murad Watson, the defensive line transfer from Syracuse, which, as you mentioned, rebuilding both lines of scrimmage, and might be an opportunity for a coming out party for him. It'll be fascinating with Ohio State. Also, whoever the quarterback is. Remember early on when it seemed as if they couldn't get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved because they had, some uncertainty at quarterback. They were playing Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. And I wonder how with, I say new coordinator, it is Brian Hartline, but he's, been a brilliant receivers coach. And Ryan obviously has been heavily involved in the offense. But I wonder about Jeremiah Smith and the new quarterback and everything.
Yeah.
But heck, you know what? I was talking to your friend Casey Wood yesterday, and he was talking about how they make it an effort with SMU's offense to get multiple playmakers that they want to get involved touches early. And I think that'll be interesting in that game too. Is like with the new quarterback, what have you got? What have you got in the bag to make sure that Jeremiah Smith doesn't have to hit a go ball or doesn't have to hit a 18-yard dig in order to get a touch? And I know they've got that within their scheme and everything, but see if they spread it out, get them moving around a little bit, and then let the young quarterback, whichever one it is, I think most assume it will be Sayin, see if he can get going a little bit. And Sark will have some stuff in the bag for Arch.
Oh, sure. And so will Pete Kwiatkowski, by the way, for say, you know what I mean? Like there's some sort of, and Matt Patricia, Arch brought this up yesterday, new defensive coordinator. So there's a huge element of the unknown for Texas walking that line of scrimmage for the first time. What will a Matt Patricia college defense look like? And you have two of the most fascinating chess pieces that are going to move around and confuse you and get exotic on third down. So I think it's going to be, I think it's an unbelievable theater.
So reserving the right to change the picks because we're mid-July here and we get to the end of August. But here's what I say, as the day unfolds, because those games are staggered, the last three that you did, the end of the noon window, Texas and Ohio State. Here's the immediate overreaction. Texas is going to win it all, and Arch is going to win the Heisman. Oh, my goodness. They just went into the horseshoe and beat the reigning champions. That'll be, and also, oh, no, what's wrong with Ohio State? Both of those will be massive overreactions. After the 3:30 window with Alabama and Florida State, because Florida State is going to be so much more improved, because they will threaten Alabama, it's going to be, instead of Florida State being improved, it's going to be, is this really working at Alabama? I know they won. And then as the season goes on, you'll find out Florida State has improved, and then off you go. And then LSU and Clemson, I think the end takeaway is going to be, we might see those two play again in Miami.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a big believer in Clemson, as I am in Penn State this year, but I have no reason to flinch at picking LSU going deep in the playoff right now. As we sit here, they have all the key tenets. I have some O-line concerns, right? That's not,
sure. They lost all those guys to the draft. They lost 4 starters, I think. So
correct, yeah. So and that will be the challenge. Remember we talked about that with Notre Dame last year going into A&M, right? Jagasaw got hurt in camp. Now he's gonna be hurt again. And it's like you go into a cauldron like that. How does your O-line hold up? And I think that's really going to be the core for LSU in this is, how do things hold up? They feel very confident that they've upgraded their receiver skill. And I do think the thing that people aren't saying out loud at LSU, Rece, is they hadn't really figured out the portal. Like internally, they hadn't really had the metrics to go buy players. Now, give Ole Miss, for example, a ton of credit. Tennessee, a ton of credit. They went 100 miles an hour at this NIL thing. And LSU kind of, in classic LSU fashion, you remember all those guys, like internally LSU couldn't get out of its own way for a little while, and they feel like they've right-sized that problem now.
They have one of the best portal classes this year, and they've got a lot of difference makers, particularly at the wide receiver.
Yes.
At the wide receiver position. But that new offensive line is going to have to deal with, a couple of All-American defensive linemen, All-American candidates anyway at Clemson with TJ Parker and Peter Woods. So who you sort of mentioned in passing earlier that the NFL scouts also very high on Clemson. I would imagine those two gentlemen are primary culprits in that, and that will be a test for the new LSU offensive line.
Oh, sure. No. And you got to think that Clemson's going to come out aggressive and blitz. And look, that's Tom Allen's MO, right? Tom Allen isn't going to sit back and, force him into a 9-play drive to make a mistake guy. He's going to go and be disruptive and has the toys, quite frankly, to do it.
You know what? I've got another story for you about media days, but not even SEC.
Let's go.
Big 12.
All right.
In Tempe for a brief period of time this week or last week with Kenny Dillingham. So when they were coming back.
So tell people what you did with Kenny.
Yeah, we've got a coaching series coming up that we'll play leading up to the season at different times on the various platforms. One guy from each conference and Marcus Freeman, who will do, and two guys from the ACC. We're going to take some of the stuff, maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't, from the Belichick-Dabo conversations with the ACC, because those are the two kingpins of the conference in the offseason. But went to see Sark, went to see Kenny, going to see Marcus, and we anticipate going to see Ryan Day before the month is out. So was at Arizona State at their football facility, got there bright and early, and Kenny had awakened at 5:30 a.m. to go play pickup basketball. And then comes only coach in America that would do something like this with us in his socks. But we did golf simulator, played the new EA Sports video game, which he got a chance to get some revenge for the Texas loss. I played Texas. He was running Arizona State, obviously. Played a little.
Is it weird when you play the video game to hear yourself, Rece? Sorry to cut you off.
Actually, I think it was Fowler and Herbstreit, which I didn't like. I would prefer it to have been David and Jesse and me. The one thing that's happened when I've played the game, when my son and I have played, is that I've been able to pick up on things. Hey, on third down in this situation, this runs too much. And the producers have said that's actually, been helpful to them. But the one thing that
feedback.
as realistic as the video game is, but that'll all run. And we talked about his competitive spirit, how he built the culture around competition. And as cliched as that sounds, I think the spin on it that he puts and his theory about how he's developed that is pretty interesting. We don't spend a lot of time with any of these guys at this point in the season saying, "Oh yeah, what are you going to do about a backup left guard?" We didn't really go down that way. Went on a walk with Sark, which I found interesting. After practice, every day after practice, when Sark is done, everybody in the organization knows, don't bother coach. He's going on his walk. Doesn't watch the film, leaves and just walks. I said, well, how do you chart the course? Depends. Usually at least an hour. And he just walks. And when he gets to a certain time, he turns around and finds his way back. And he doesn't
just walks campus. It's not like there's
not even sometimes not even campus.
There.
He goes into Austin, sort of joking. He said maybe even some places in Austin that they might prefer the head coach not wander into alone, but he does. And, so it's, it's something he clears his mind and walks, thinks. We talked about the best idea, best play call or twist that he'd come up with while just walking and thinking and different things. It's pretty good stuff. But back to Dillingham, as realistic as the EA Sports game will be, and maybe there'll be media days in it someday, the return trip home from media days will never make the EA Sports game unless television becomes smell-o-vision. Kenny Dillingham, we learned, has an aversion, as most of us do, but he has an extensive aversion to smells that might emanate if someone perhaps had a lunch that didn't quite agree with them. Okay?
Flatulence, is that a proper word?
Flatulence, yes. Or beyond. Either or beyond. So they're on the plane. an unnamed, and I didn't get to the bottom of this because I'm not Pete Thamel, and also I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but someone had issues. And coming back.
Small plane, big issues.
Yeah. So because of this aversion, he was trying to come up with any way he could to stop the smell, which included stuffing grapes into his nose. Some of the players found this amusing that were with him, by the way, wildly amusing. And then he came up with something that perhaps the airlines might think about, that he peeled and squeezed an orange. And because the grapes didn't work, apparently. And then he found a way to take the orange peels, squeezed, and affix them over the vents, and then have some lovely citrus aroma.
Natural air freshener.
Wafting its way through the plane. And apparently that was that took care of business.
All right. Well, that was an unexpected twist, Rece, to culminate our pod chat.
Who you got? Who have you got left? Who are you most looking forward to hearing from in the remaining time you have in Atlanta?
So we're halfway through here. We're taping this on Wednesday morning. We still have Bama. We still have A&M. Mississippi State's today. All eyes turned to Eli Drinkwitz because nobody said anything interesting, and he's like the only one left with a chance. Because we all love Kalen DeBoer, and his teams are exciting. He is not gonna win media day with a hot take, So Kalen DeBoer is a non-pot stirrer. He is straightforward Dakota, if you will. So, Eli, our lonely eyes turn to you. And I think, Rece, our lonely eyes turned to Bill Connelly in the waiting room here.
As Pete perfectly segued, Bill Connelly is joining us now. And Pete, by the way, is on his way down the elevator at whatever hotel he's staying at in Atlanta, headed down to Media Days to perhaps incite Eli Drinkwitz to providing some incendiary comments and spice up things at Media Days. I don't think he'll have to push terribly hard, as Drink is one of the funnier coaches in all of college football, a man with whom Bill Connelly is very familiar, a Mizzou alum and passionate supporter of the Tigers, and also the author of a terrific new book called Forward Progress. If you haven't bought it, if you haven't looked at it, you really need to go out and get it right now. Bill, welcome. How's the book doing so far?
Well, we're still in pre-order mode here. It is available on Amazon, and apparently the way you sell books in 2025 is tell everybody to go get it on Amazon and rig the algorithm. So yes, everybody go get it on Amazon, rig the algorithm, and help out. The book will come out September 2nd.
I wasn't sure of the release date, to be honest with you, but you were gracious enough to send me an advance copy, which I have read a good portion of. What made you want to write this? Give us a synopsis of what your goal was in writing this book.
So I think before I came to ESPN, I was at SB Nation. I think the most popular thing I did there was in 2017 when I basically laid out a platform for running for college football commissioner. We had a photo shoot like the guy did Michelle Obama the week before, and then it came to the DC offices and took some cheesy photos and everything. And I had like a 9-point platform of here's what I would change if I was in charge of college football. And it was really well received. And it was a fun exercise for me to basically walk through, here's what I think, here's my vision of the sport. In the last 8 years since then, so much has changed. And kind of number one, I got a lot of what I wanted on that platform, but some of the forces underneath in terms of inequality, the money just floating upward more and more and more, those things haven't gotten any better because there's nobody in charge. There's no commissioner in charge of the sport to say no to certain people. So with as much change that was happening, I started to realize I didn't really have a grand vision anymore. Things were just, shifting left and right, and I had reactions or opinions, but I didn't really have a grand vision of the sport. And so I thought, what better exercise than to write a book, what amounts to basically how did we get here and where are we going? That's the general premise of the book. It's half history, half, manifesto, basically. And it was really kind of clarifying for me, and hopefully it'll be good for other people too.
Greg Sankey said at SEC Media Days that college sports aren't broken, but they are under strain.
Yep.
Based on your work on this book, how would you characterize broken versus strained?
Well, we have this thing in college football, especially every sport, I guess, but especially college football, where any change we don't like is killing the sport. The sport's dying, and the sport's not dying at all. Like, the attendance is good. TV ratings are good. There's no evidence that anything is dying. So I realize that's just us being fans, but no, I mean, there's no evidence anything's broken here. It's just you don't want it to break. One of the chapters in the book is basically how things break, how sports fall from grace. What assumptions did NASCAR or boxing or kind of college football, although that was a lot of external forces. When sports struggle, why do they struggle? And that was the reason why, is because we don't know that college football struggle. We don't have any evidence of that, but there's a lot of strain, a lot of change, and we want to make sure that the wrong things don't change.
That seems to be a challenge for college football, whether it realizes it or not. You want to appeal to the wider swath, getting more teams involved, having more teams in contention in November, which everyone would agree is a good thing. But as I've said many times, even when I said that I was for the 12-team playoff, but that it comes with a cost. It comes with the cost of the arguing that sort of fuels a lot of the passion among the most devoted fans over regular season outcomes, which has really been the backbone and the oddity of this sport for generations, is that a game in September, week 2, might in years past determine who plays in the national championship game. You can say that's not as it should be, a reasonable take. You can also say it's unique and pulls a thread through an entire season that generates debate. There has to be the right balance, in my judgment, Bill, of holding on to that while not holding on to it so tightly that it debilitates picking a champion. Is that a reasonable assessment of the situation?
Yeah, I think, there were a lot of the playoff skeptics talking when we were talking about expansion to 12 or whatever, any expansion whatsoever. When we were originally talking about a playoff to begin with, that we're saying, the integrity of the college football regular season, that's the most important. And I think, I agree that it's important. I always had kind of a different take. So far, it's been right. My take has just always been trust your product. Like, Michigan, Ohio State's always going to matter because it's Michigan, Ohio State. Alabama's not going to sit starters against Auburn because they have a playoff spot already. They're going to try to beat Auburn. And you just have to trust that those types of things, those really super high level games, are always going to mean something. Just like even with college basketball going through ups and downs, Duke, North Carolina is still a pretty big deal. And so you just kind of have to trust your product in that regard. But I do think the integrity.
But it stands alone. I would say this, Bill, and I don't want to come off as an anti-expansion. 12 is fine.
Yep.
But Duke, Carolina, I would argue, from my years of covering basketball, you're 100% right. Nothing changes. But you're also taking the exception. You're also taking the one game in the entire sport that consistently draws eyeballs and ratings no matter where they stand nationally. Now, there was a period of time, I think, this year that Alabama-Auburn outdrew, or if it didn't outdraw, it was right there with it in ratings for Carolina-Duke. But that was 1 versus 2. When you have, 9-loss Alabama against 7-loss Auburn in February, nobody's watching. You get that with Carolina-Duke, 9-loss Duke, 7-loss Carolina, everybody's still watching. So that is that's the exception to the rule. So I see what you're saying, but I don't think there are precious few of those. So I just don't want it to get too big and to diminish it too much. It's one of the reasons I'm against the auto bids, because if you do the auto bids, then what in the world? Two things. What in the world difference does Texas Ohio State make? Right. Number one. Number two, why would you play it?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I was never afraid of 12. I'm honestly not really afraid of 16.
Nor am I.
With 5 plus 11. If we do it, then the auto bids plus at-larges. But you're exactly right. If we congratulations for creating an auto bid system where you got a few different games on championship weekend that matter. You just made Texas Ohio State an exhibition game that doesn't matter in the slightest. And that's wild that we would go that route.
Yeah, that crystallizes, and I don't think we're going that route, by the way,
right.
But that crystallizes what I'm talking about. Would that Saturday in November or first Saturday in December, whenever it would fall, with all of those games right there, winner goes in, loser goes home, would that be great? You bet it would. It'd be awesome. But everything comes with a cost. And would it be so awesome that you relegated LSU, Clemson, Texas, Ohio State to, it doesn't mean anything. We'll just try to get one of our auto bids. It just,
and my other point always too was, do you think back to last year, Big Ten had a bunch of playoff or play-in games the last Saturday of the season. Indiana, 11-1 Indiana loses, gets upset by 8-4 Iowa, loses their playoff bid. What was the regular season for them?
Right.
That's where that's where you start to worry. That's where I start to worry about integrity of the regular season. Otherwise, I mean, there's always going to be a wave at the start of the season of hooray, this sport's back. Like, I almost enjoy when there aren't any huge week one games, just because we're taking in and everything anyway. Let's save the big ones for later. Obviously, we got some pretty big ones this year. But there's always going to be that. I'm not worried about nobody caring about a Texas Ohio State game in that universe. But no, I mean, we do have to be a little careful. And going back to the NASCAR thing, this won't surprise you that our friend Ryan McGee was one of the stars of that chapter, talking about NASCAR and how sports fall from grace. And he basically said, he was, I was in the room for when they were having these conversations about moving this to wherever, LA or wherever. I don't remember the order of when they started branching out and taking the Labor Day race away from Darlington and whatnot. But he's like, here's our schedule for this year, and don't worry about the hard course. They're not going anywhere. It's fine. They went somewhere. They started drifting away, and that's just what I'm kind of curious about. When everything's great, the sports, there's really nothing you can do that's going to make things worse. But then when there's an external factor, whether it was the economic crash in the late 2000s that hurt NASCAR a lot, when something happens to take the money away or the casuals away, and you need the hardcores, you got to make sure that you've been treating them well and that the hardcores are there.
Yeah, because the aggregators will sometimes seize on something, and it's probably too late because I should have been more clear. The competitors on the field and the coaches on the sidelines will always care about Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson. My point about the is not the game itself. It's like the stakes. Yeah. There's something that adds to all of the other things when you attach some level of stakes. Now, the counter argument right now would obviously be, well, if Texas loses in Columbus, they're not out of it, and of course not. And they don't even have to win the SEC. They're still not out of it. Yeah. And I think that's a healthy, positive thing. But you don't want to relegate it to the point that only conference games matter, that only the conference championship weekend matters, that's all that matters, because that is a challenge. Speaking of, I wouldn't say falling from grace, but speaking of a constant struggle, that is the challenge that college basketball routinely faces, is that the only thing that matters is not only getting into that tournament, but how you perform once you arrive in that tournament. And ultimately, that's how it is in all sports. Yeah. I get that. But along the way, you don't want to relegate the feelings and the passion and the following and the fervor along the way to be solely kicked down the road to, okay, we'll see what happens in the playoff. And I'm speaking not of the competitors. I'm speaking more of the consumers, the fans, the people around, the people who might just be college football fans, but they aren't Texas or Ohio State fans or LSU or Clemson fans. Those people are always going to care. It's their team, live and die, and that's great. That's the lifeblood of the sport. But you want it to feel big to everybody, as big as it can, as important as it can, as special as it can. Might be the best way to say it.
Yeah, it was kind of enlightening the other day. My editor, we were going through kind of like a self-scout in the off season here, like my Friday previews during the season. What clicks and what doesn't? Like which ones perform really well and what don't? Are there certain threads we can figure out there. There were no threads whatsoever. There were huge columns, some of the best performers were week 1 things, of course, because we're all excited. There are a couple of them were championship weekend things, of course, but then there were like a couple of week 3 columns with no big games that killed. And I think, they don't always, it's always kind of just a series of wavelengths with how everything performs, but it was really enlightening just in terms of the goal here is to make sure everybody's excited and engaged for 14 straight weeks. And there's always going to be kind of an interesting balance to that. And we're really trying to do 2 different things. If you care about the health of the sport, you want the casuals, you want everybody engaged and interested in having the big marquee games. And you want to make sure that the locals who show up every Saturday, they're seeing their team play. They're seeing what they want to see. They're seeing their team play the teams they want to play. Which is becoming an increasing challenge. They just, you want those local fans engaged, and you want the big casuals who are pretty distractible to make sure that they have something to watch too. And a lot of these things are kind of at odds with each other. I love parity and I love treating players really well, but if you treat players really well and let them go where they want to go, parity's going to suffer, because everybody, more players grow up wanting to play for Ohio State than, Ohio or whatever. And so it's hard. It's a big balancing act. And, like I've said before many times on here, I'd love for somebody to be in charge of this sport who cares about that specifically and isn't just trying to further their own interests conference-wise.
If you want to look at alternative ideas and a really comprehensive and terrific history of how we got to this point, pre-order Forward Progress now available at all the usual outlets, Bill?
As far as I know, yeah. It's right. Amazon, bookshop.org, probably Barnes & Noble, all those places. And then you can actually get a physical copy here in a couple more months.
All right. Sounds great. I look forward to that. The great Bill Connelly, our friend of the College Game Day Podcast, writer extraordinaire, also has great conference previews up on ESPN.com, which you will want to dive into as we get closer and closer to the season, the anticipation, which is one of the things that drives this sport. Bill, great being with you. Great to have Pete Thamel with us this morning before he went down to stir the pot with Eli Drinkwitz, we would presume. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day Podcast. Download wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or better yet, subscribe, and you'll never miss an episode, nor will you ever miss a tip about what to do if flatulence attacks you on an aircraft.